Video link. David Simmons.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I start by drawing the House's attention to my register of interest, in particular my role as Vice President of the Local Government Association and as a serving councillor. I've listened intently to the remarks that have been made during the course of the debate. I think we need to reflect on the fact that local government finance has been on a journey over many decades as governments of all parties have sought reform and efficiency with varying results. My first ever council tax fixing meeting was the last Labour administration in the London Borough of Hillingdon, proposing a 14.8% council tax rise, not untypical under the Labour regime in the late 1990s, with £60 million of unspecified efficiency savings, a budget described at the time as legal only for the duration of the meeting at which it was set. And the party opposite do need to reflect when commenting on this, that they are past masters at the art of putting up local taxes, in that case very much as they funneled money to northern authorities rather than ensuring an equitable distribution of funding, as the revised funding formula which the government has brought forward seeks to achieve. But the big challenges remain, and in particular I would like to highlight the differential impact and the differential benefit that we see from council tax rises. If we look at London alone, there are 33 authorities with essentially the same set of responsibilities governed by statute to their residents. But because of the different proportions of budgets that are raised by council tax, the amount that the maximum possible social care precept, if applied, would raise in one of those authorities at one end is an additional 0.2% of resource, and at the highest end an additional 1.8%. And that's because we see a variation between around 90% and around 10% of funding being raised through the council tax, with the rest coming from other sources. So it's very clear and I very much agree with the remarks that have been made during the course of the debate, that council tax is not a long-term and sustainable solution to the challenge of social care funding. But what is also clear is that the solutions are likely to be local. And one of the key lessons that I've seen in the course of the COVID pandemic is that strong local services, and this is true throughout the world, have been crucial in saving lives and mitigating the impact on communities. And the UK will do well, for the purposes of its future resilience, to emulate places that have highly autonomous, devolved local authorities that have made good decisions over many decades that meant that they were in a good position to support their residents when a crisis of this nature hits. So we need to be thinking as a parliament, in my view, what are those things which we most effectively do at the centre, and which are those things which we need to finance, but which we believe are most effectively done locally. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to particularly associate myself with the remarks of my right honourable friend, the member for Newark, in the opening of this debate. It's clear that councils have done a remarkable job in supporting residents, and perhaps almost uniquely across the public sector, have been exceptionally efficient and effective in knowing their communities and ensuring that the resources, whether from central government or locally raised, have got to the sharp end. But as we consider the local government finance position today, we need to reflect on a decade which began with a council tax freeze grant, councils being encouraged with extra resources to freeze council tax and have no rise at all, to a position where 85% of the extra resources which become available as a result of these initiatives will be financed through rises in council tax. So we need to ensure that the fact that we have these local authorities with a very strong, very clear democratic mandate that are, for the most part, led by exactly the sort of people that all of our communities want to see more of in politics, people who are more trusted than we as members of parliament to make decisions in the local interest, have genuine autonomy and control over those things for which they are responsible, and are properly resourced for doing those things which we in this House have decided we are going to require them to do. It's very clear from the feedback I've had across London, and I draw members' attention to the London Council's finance report, which highlighted that the grant in respect of COVID costs provided by the department was likely to meet those costs pretty much in full, a position that was very much welcomed. But it is also something that reflects the efficiency of those local authorities, their ability, as I said, to get that money to the sharp end. So whilst I think it is absolutely right that the government has made additional resources available, that it's absolutely capitalised on the capability that local authorities have, to know their communities, to know how to find those people who may be reluctant to have a vaccination, to identify communities that they need to get into, who need extra support and help, to provide the staff redeployed from libraries, from all sorts of different services, to do the door knocking for test, track and trace. They are the people who have unequivocally stepped up to the plate and gone beyond what is required during this crisis. And as we go beyond this one-year settlement, welcome as many of its provisions are, we need to ensure that we have a proper reflection about how we sustain those services for the future, and that we move away from an annual wrangling really between government and local government, but into a situation where we each have a much more settled view about what the other's role is and a much more settled view about how we're going to finance it for the long term. Important steps, most definitely in the right direction, and I very much welcome the settlement that's been to be voted on today, but it is clear that we need to find a different way of formulating that relationship for the long-term future and the good of our communities.